Okay, looks like it's working this time. So, hey AMPers, this is Dr. Jones checking in. This is a video lecture for ANP 2, lecture test 2, and this is the last video, which I believe is number 9. So we're going to finish up with this video and finish pages 22, 23, and 24. It still looks like we're recording this time, so we're good. So top of page 22, 18:9. I try to show you the tops of the pages because I know with different versions of Word and what have you that sometimes the formatting gets shifted. So that's why I show you the tops of the page so you know what it looks like, even if it's on a different page. So the intestines, there's kind of a lot, so we'll get there. The kidneys release the steroid hormone calcitriol. Let's go, I like the blue with this background. Going with the blue. Calcitriol, which is important for dietary calcium absorption. Calcium is Ca2+ or Ca++. Kidneys also release the peptide hormone erythropoietin, EPO, and erythropoietin and the enzyme renin, which are involved in the regulation of blood volume and blood pressure. So an erythrocyte is a red blood cell. Okay, that was more terrible than usual, but that's RBC for red blood cell. So erythropoietin is the hormone that makes you make more red blood cells. And then renin is an enzyme that starts the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, which we talked about briefly. Here it is. The RAAS, the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. And it's for low blood volume and low blood pressure, and it acts to raise blood volume and blood pressure. And so it makes the kidney release erythropoietin, which makes RBCs, and then renin, which turns angiotensinogen into angiotensin 1, and then the lungs release ACE, which is angiotensin converting enzyme, which turns angiotensin 1 into angiotensin 2. And that makes you thirsty. So you drink more water. So that will increase blood volume. And when you increase blood volume, that increases blood pressure because there's more blood volume. So it's pushing more on the walls of the blood vessels, which is blood pressure. It's the pressure of the volume. So when you increase the volume, you increase the pressure. Follow? Okay. So it also makes you secrete ADH. ADH makes you retain water at the kidneys, meaning you pee less. You pee out the same amount of solute, but in less water, to be clear. And aldosterone is secreted, which makes you thirsty, and there's a whole shebang of aldosterone, retain the water, and the sodium at the kidneys. And that together with the increase in red blood cells, which will also increase the blood volume, increases the blood volume, which increases the blood pressure. So that's the RAAS, the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. The previous edition of the book, it was the renin-angiotensin system. And to be perfectly clear, we're going to have another renin. And it's going to have an extra N. It's going to be renin, and it's going to be an enzyme in stomachs that curdles milk. And that will be a question on the final. But for now, we're at renin, which is the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. Okay, moving back. All of that to say, that happens that starts at the kidneys. That starts in the kidneys. Okay. So, also in the kidneys, the calcitriol, which makes you absorb the calcium and the phosphorus from your food. Without calcitriol, you just poop it out. Bye-bye. Okay. Calcitriol, blood volume and blood pressure. All right. Calcitriol is released in response to parathyroid hormone, also called parathormone. And these two are synergists. They work together. They do nearly the same, sort of the same thing, but they work together to get the same thing done. And cholecalciferol is the technical term, cholecalciferol is your technical term for vitamin D3, and it is made in the skin, the integumentary system, in the presence of sunlight, which we talked about last semester. Cholecalciferol is indirectly converted to calcitriol. It's like a long, drawn-out process. We're happy to skip those details. And calcitriol's main function is to increase the dietary absorption of calcium and phosphorus. And phosphorus is PO subscript 4 superscript 3 minus. I won't ask you, but if you see that, if you see it, you need to know what it is. I tell you so that you can recognize it for, that's a phosphate group. So when you phosphorylate something, which we will do this semester, that's what you're adding when you phosphorylate something. You're adding a phosphate group. Erythropoietin is erythrin, angiotensin, aldosterone. Okay, erythropoietin is released in response to low oxygen levels in the kidneys. I thought this was the next slide. There it is. And EPO causes red bone marrow to produce RBCs, which are erythrocytes. So erythropoietin makes erythrocytes, which increases blood volume and blood oxygen levels. So when you increase the water content of the blood, you increase the blood volume without increasing the oxygen levels. The red blood cells carry oxygen, so EPO increases both blood volume and blood oxygen. Renin is released in response to sympathetic stimulation or decreased blood volume in the kidneys. It starts the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, which doesn't quite fit on that last line on mine. And then it converts angiotensinogen into angiotensin 1. I just skipped back half the slideshow to tell you this, and it was like the next slide. And the lungs convert angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2 with ACE, angiotensin converting enzyme, which we will talk about again during respiratory. And the lungs convert angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2, which increases thirst and blood pressure while stimulating the secretion of aldosterone and ADH. Aldosterone, as a review, is from the zona glomerulosa and causes the kidneys to retain both sodium and water. ADH is from the posterior pituitary gland. It's made in the hypothalamus, released at the postpit, the neurohypophysis. And it causes the kidneys to retain water. So you pee out less water and less salt, which increases your blood volume, which increases your blood pressure. Next page, page 23. So we've got this whole renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. This entire RAAS shebang with EPO, renin, ADH, and aldosterone. There's another one in there somewhere. This all increases blood volume and increases blood pressure. What about when your blood volume and blood pressure are too high? Well, then you will stretch out the heart and it will release natriuretic peptides. Alpha natriuretic peptide and beta natriuretic peptide, so ANP and BNP. Catch all that. So natriuretic peptides, the natrium is the Latin word for sodium. That's why sodium's abbreviation is Na+, and that's for the natrium. So that means sodium peptides. Natriuretic peptides are released when blood volume is too high. There are stretch receptors in the atria and the ventricles. And how they oppose the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, they promote the loss of water and salt at the kidneys, so they make you pee out more water and more salt. They inhibit renin, AGH, and aldosterone, so they inhibit most of the working parts of the RAAS. They suppress thirst, and they prevent high blood pressure. So together, they work to decrease blood volume, decrease blood pressure, and decrease the stretch of the heart. Next, the thymus secretes thymosins, and up there it says thymus, which is this word. The thymus sits in front of the great vessels. It's not on top of, it's not in front of the heart, it's on top of the heart, in front of the great vessels. It's right behind your sternum. Okay. So the thymus secretes thymosins, which develop and maintain immune defenses. The thymus makes lymphocytes, which are a type of white blood cell, which are very important in immune response. And we'll talk about that. In males, okay, so the testes secrete androgens. The main androgen is testosterone. So these ovals are called seminiferous tubules, and that's where the little baby sperm are. And in between the seminiferous tubules, do I have a picture here? See all these little cells in between? These are interstitial endocrine cells. They're outside of the seminiferous tubules, in between the seminiferous tubules, and they are what make the androgens. And the main androgen is testosterone. The nurse cells, which are in these seminiferous tubules, nursing the little baby sperm, they take care of, they feed them, they help them grow. They make inhibin, and they grow the sperm, they differentiate and physically mature the sperm. So, need those if you want functional sperm. In people with ovaries, the ovaries make estrogens. The main estrogen is estradiol. And ovulation is when the oocyte is released from the ovary. And we will talk more about that. And the follicle releases the oocyte. Okay, so the follicle stimulating hormone causes the development of the follicle. And then that's like the first half of the cycle. Second half of the cycle, there's like a surge of luteinizing hormone, and that causes the ovulation. It causes the release of the oocyte, and then that follicle turns into a corpus luteum. Get it? Luteinizing hormone, corpus luteum. Like that. And it releases both estrogens and progestins. The main progestin is progesterone. And the corpus luteum helps prepare the body for pregnancy. It pumps out the hormones to maintain a pregnancy in case this ovulated oocyte is fertilized. Now, in the presence of pregnancy, it will continue, the corpus luteum will continue to pump out the hormones to maintain the pregnancy until the placenta is developed enough to pump out those hormones. I'm talking mostly about progesterone here, the hormones to maintain the pregnancy. And in the absence of a fertilized oocyte, after 2 weeks, 12 days, that'll degenerate into a corpus albicans, and then you will start your next cycle with the menstrual period. The first day of the menstrual period is the first day of your new cycle. So that's how you count the cycles. Okay, more about that later in the semester. Okay, adipose tissue produces the hormone leptin, L-E-P-T-I-N, which does appetite control. It makes satiety, which is helping you feel full. Satiated means full, satisfied. And leptin is required for normal GnRH and gonadotropin synthesis. The gonadotropins are FSH and LH. So you need a certain amount of body fat in order to have enough leptin to have enough gonadotropin. So leptin is required for normal puberty, fertility, and menstrual cycles. If your body fat percentage is too low, those will not happen. Last page, page 24. When a cell receives instructions from two different hormones. Oh, this is the next slide. We'll come back. I'm out of order. Oh, no, I don't have a slide for this. Okay. One, they can be antagonists. Antagonistic, they can be opposing, like calcitonin and parathyroid hormone. One raises calcium, one lowers calcium. They are antagonists. They work together to make negative feedback happen. Synergistic, these are additive, like growth hormone and glucocorticoids are both glucose sparing. So they do, in that way, the same thing. Permissive, both hormones are necessary for the effect, like epinephrine and thyroid, which is a detail we did not get into. And then integrative, they have different but complementary effects, and this happens with the renin, aldosterone, and ADH, where they all work together, although renin's an enzyme, not a hormone. They all work together to increase blood volume and blood pressure. Okay, and now the slide we're on. Important for growth, and when I say growth, I don't mean personal growth, I mean physical growth from before you quit growing tall. So kids growing up. My 14-year-old has jeans that he finally grew into the waist and the legs are this far off his ankles. So he's not, he comes up to about here on me now, which at 14 is a little shorter than I thought he'd be, but my husband is 6'6", but he had like a growth spurt like later. Like I've seen his driver's license, his first driver's license, he was 5'8". His second driver's license, he was 6'3". He was working at Whataburger at the time and would like sit down and eat 2 Whatameals, he says. So we're saving money for when my son hits that growth spurt. So growth hormone is important for growing taller. You also need these other hormones, thyroid hormones, insulin, PTH, and CT, and of course the reproductive hormones are all necessary for the process. Not enough of any one of these can stunt growth. So they all have to work together. Stress, that's right, we're talking about it. Any condition, physical or emotional, that threatens homeostasis. That's kind of vague and kind of everything. Stress response is called GAS, the General Adaptation Syndrome. And that's how the body responds. So there are 3 phases. First is the alarm phase, and the alarm phase is going to be your fight or flight, your epinephrine, norepinephrine, and it lasts for a few hours. Then you go into the resistance phase. The resistance phase is going to be main concept here. These are all important, but main concept here is your glucocorticoids. And then after you've run out, then you go into the exhaustion phase, which can be fatal. So. Okay. Anabolic steroids are synthetic androgens and they are bad for you. The steroids your grandma's on for her lupus, those are different than anabolic steroids. There's lots of different steroid hormones. EPO is erythropoietin. Sometimes people take it to improve athletic performance because with increased red blood cells is increased oxygen is increased ATP is more go and go faster for longer. However, when you increase the artificially increase the amount of red blood cells, the percentage of red blood cells in your bloodstream, you make the blood thick and viscous and harder to pump. And so part of why we don't want athletes to take EPO is because there's a higher risk of them dying of heart attacks, which I don't think sports are worth dying for. GHB has an anesthetic effect. And then the endocrine system changes very little with age, with the notable exception of the reproductive system. And this is a statue at the Rockport where the art museum used to be, but we still have our statue garden. The museum building had to come down after Harvey, but they do have a new smaller building, and they're going to be building a bigger one. But these beautiful birds are still there, so fun. Great view. Oh, and you can see there's my little baby when she was quite smaller. She's much bigger than that now. All right, so this has been a video lecture for 2402, lecture test 2, video 9, Notesets pages 22 through 24. Thank you as always for tuning in. The education must go on. And I will say that the world needs healthcare workers now more than ever. So, thank you. Dr. J out. Oh wait, I gotta get a keyboard. Okay, Command, Control, Escape. That's what it was. I remembered. Have a good one, guys.